First, I want to discuss about the difference between the Chinese culture and the Western culture or the other foreign culture. Now, first, we're discussing about the concept, reform. We really need a discussion because first we must understand what it means, reform. Otherwise, we can never discuss whether China reformed its foreign policy. You can only say China changed its foreign policy. Okay, now China is, let's talk about Japan. And Japan is regarded as a physics country, right? That country didn't involve in the war since the end of the World War II. They regarded they are very pacifistic. Okay, now they make decision. They said, no, it's bad. Abe said that, no, it's too bad. This country lost the right to launch a war, and we should regain our international respect. So Abe decided to revise the constitution and to regain the right of war, and then it means that Japan wants to initiate a war against other countries. Do you think that's a reform? If you make some change towards the bad direction, generally commonly recognized, the change is toward the evil direction, not regarded as a reform. And usually regarded, and this kind of change will possibly lead to a good result, right? So here we know that when we're talking about the reform, I don't know, because I really didn't get the answer from any foreign students, and from my understanding, in Chinese, when we use the term about reform, it means that we do something to get a better result. It's not we do something to get a worse result.
I want to know, what do you mean by good result?
No matter what is good or bad, it means that generally you believe it will lead to something good.
So it's just a kind of imagination, or it's just a kind of concept?
No. We are talking about the definition of the reform. It's not talking about the result of the reform. I mean, you said that we are going to reform something. It means that we want to do something good. It rather than we want to do something really bad. Right?
But doesn't that mean, I actually agree with him, so that would mean that in every reform, there would the people that start the reform would, of course, intend it to change to something better, as you say.
Yes.
But what if they, let's say, are a minority in a suppressive government? We have seen that in Europe many times. So the majority of the people would actually not see that as a reform.
Yes, very good. So now we come to this point. And initially, you have a good heart. Initially, you want to do something for good, not for bad. The result possibly very bad. That's a different thing. And you can see the reform failed. The reform resulted in a bad disaster. And the reform is resulted in something we do not expect it. Just like we say in the Egypt. And the people want to see the reform for democracy, and then the result is the reform resulted in the violence, and also now then finally they turn back to the military regime, right? So the result is another thing, and we're talking about definition of the reform. Reform means that at the very beginning you want to do something good. Okay, why we spend time on the discussion? And because I want to remind you that in China, whenever we're talking about reform, we always remember something. In history, very, very bloody. Reform is very dangerous. Reformers always resulted in a very, very bad tragedy. Reformers only highly appreciated by whom? By the people after him. But usually, in most cases, they are not that highly appreciated by their people. So now I give you the photos, and I'm 100% sure it's very difficult for you to identify who are they, even for me. I got them from the website. And the first one, and at the upper right corner, that's Shang Yang. Shang Yang is a reformer of the Qin state, not Qin dynasty. He is an assistant or the prime minister, served the first emperor's great-great-great-grandfather. And he helped his the Qin Xiaogong, the king of the Xiaogong, and to reform that country and make this country strong. And Xiaogong's son does not like him. He thinks he changed the system, changed the tradition, and make this noble families no longer being respected as before. So they tried to arrest, prison him. He escaped and launched a rebellion against the ruler, and then he was killed in the war. Even after that, even he was killed in the war, and then his body was taken back to the state of Qin. And then they used the 5 horses and tied the string on his fur lambs and the head and split the body. That's the result. Okay, then at that's left. On the right side, maybe that's opposite from me. I think from this side. This is left side. Left side of the up, and then we have Wang Anshi, and he devoted his whole life to reform, and finally he failed. He's appreciated by the emperor, but he's really hated by his colleagues. And one of the colleagues is very famous, and he's supposed the great-great-grandson of the Confucius and Kong Rong, right? And then they hate him. They think he reformed the tradition. That's a bad thing. And then finally he lost his position. And then the last 2 persons, and that's at the left. This is Tan Sitong. He was executed by the Qing dynasty, and at the right is the Liang Qichao. Once he was served as the professor of this university at Tsinghua, and the 2 of them launched the reform in Qing dynasty, and then they failed, and then they have a very, very tragedy result. Why I want to give this introduction to you, and I mean that to reform foreign policy is dangerous in China. It's very dangerous. And people didn't realize that. Many people believe if you have the power, you can change the foreign policy. Not that easy. You want to reform foreign policy, and you run big risk. There's strong interest group against the reform. And there's a strong interest group and against the change of the foreign policy. And you all know that. So do any of you know that the last 2 years, we reformed our foreign policy from the Deng Xiaoping's policy. Do anyone knows that? Or anyone heard about that? Not yet. Okay, later on we'll discuss about that. It means that in China, no matter you want to reform the political system, or reform the foreign policy, or reform the economy, and no matter what kind of reform, it's very, very difficult. And so, do anyone listen to Li Keqiang's very recent news conference, press conference? Okay, so what's the most impressive thing, or you can summarize by yourself his speech, what he's talking about in his press conference? Okay, the term he used the most often in his report, government report? No? Do anyone know that? Or any commentary about his report? It's a reform. And this government, headed by Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang, strongly emphasize that we want to continue the deeper reform. We want to have a reform in more and more fields. We want to reform as much as possible. Right? I think it's very, very difficult to do that. Okay. And then this becomes more difficult. And do anyone know that when we started the policy, opening up and reform? Or reform and opening up. When do we start the policy in China? 1978, exactly. So Deng Xiaoping adopted this policy or this strategy, and which is fundamentally different from Mao Zedong's political guideline. That guideline is focused on the class struggle. And Deng Xiaoping said, no, we should shift from the focus on the class struggle to economic development. So if we want to make this country rich, we make this country strong, we need to open this country. During Mao Zedong's period, the country is very closed. And that we should open this country, we should reform all these systems. And that's a really good thing. And for most of the Chinese, remember what happened in the 1980s. And for most of the high-ranking officials, including the policymakers today, and they think that's the right policy. That's the right strategy because of the reform and opening up. So we make China the second largest economy in the last 30 years. Okay. Then the question is that, do anyone know that when do we start the reform, the concept of reform, and apply it to the foreign policy? Definitely not in 1978. When? When do we apply the concept reform to foreign policy? Okay, let's guess. Okay, no, 1978, we started reform. No, definitely after that, not before that. Okay, after 1978, later we reformed the foreign policy. How late?
I would guess with the end of the Cold War.
End of the Cold War, 1992. Yeah. Okay, anyone later than that? Can anyone suggest a year later than that?
WTO application?
That means 1995. Okay, later. Any year is later than that? So you see, okay, how late?
When China joined the WTO?
That 1995. Yeah.
I say earlier, 1979.
No, not before. Okay, actually, I want to tell you why I want to inform you this. The reform, the concept of reform, are forbidden to be applied to the foreign policy in 1978. We regard it, and we made all mistakes in many fields, but not foreign policy. That's why just now he suggests that we reform the foreign policy in 1972 because we normalize the relationship with the U.S., right? So that events make you think about trying to reform the foreign policy in 1972. No. And at that time, we concerned our foreign policy never be wrong. And so that's why by 1978, when this country started the nationally wide reform, we said that, no, we do not need reform in foreign policy. And these principles have been carried on for several decades until 2013. 2013, and on October 24th, and it's the first time, and Xi Jinping said that we should start the reform and innovation in foreign policy. It's the first time we apply the concept reform to foreign policy. And why I want to tell you that? I tell you that how difficult it is if you want to reform the foreign policy. It's not every leader dare to. Even Deng Xiaoping dare not say that we should reform foreign policy. Because they regarded Mao Zedong made a mistake in other fields, but not in the field of the foreign policy. We do not need reform. And Zhou Enlai, at the very beginning, the person you have not identified, and is regarded as a god in foreign policy. And he is regarded as a founding father of China's the foreign policy of a PRC. And we think Zhou Enlai is such a nice guy. Zhou Enlai made no mistake in foreign policy. So since there's no mistake, we do not need reform. Okay, then we come to the second question. When you said you want to reform something, what's the implication it is? What I mean, when you say we should reform, okay, Professor Li Daokui tried to reform the classes. That's why he invited me here. Okay, what's the implication when he reformed this class?
That means people want to get better situation.
Okay, this is a positive answer. He wants to get something better. What's the implication behind it? Can we give the chance to her?
That it wasn't good enough to begin with.
Exactly. That means current situation has defects. You have to admit it. There's defects. You have to admit it. What you have now is not perfect. And sometimes you even have to admit it. There's a mistake. We should correct the mistake. So when you said that you want to reform something, immediately people will say, wait a minute, do you mean we're wrong now? You have to say yes. If we're perfect, why we reform? Right? So that's why when you reform, no matter in foreign policy or in any sector, you must point out what is a defect, what is not desirable. We have to change. So same thing, and so you see, at the first time, and Xi Jinping said that we should apply the reform in foreign policy or in diplomacy. And then we need to top design of diplomatic activity, and we need to coordinate various departments for foreign policy, and we need to initiate, we need the initiation of the diplomacy. And the first one, top design, means that the policymaker at the top should have the general design. And so you see, now we have the Silk Belt and the Maritime Silk Road. Do anyone heard that? So-called one belt and one road. This is something new. We never had before, right? So this is come from the top. It's not initiated from the bottom. It's up and down. It's not a bottoms up. So this is called that we should have a top design for foreign policy. And then we establish the Security Council. We don't have this before. Americans have this for decades. The Soviet Union and Russia have this organization, agent for several decades. But in China, we don't have that. And then 2013, and we established National Security Council. And the purpose of this establishing this organization is to do the conciliation among coordination, not conciliation, do the coordination among different departments, right? Like the economic departments, and definitely disagree with the defense departments, right? Defense department definitely disagree with the foreign ministry. So because every ministry have their own interests, have their own concern, so you need a body to coordinate these organizations. And also initiation of diplomacy. That means we should do something initiatively, rather than only response to what? The change of the international environment. So I give you a case. AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Do anyone know what happened in the last 2 days about this? Okay, so he knows that. And the UK and sent an application to China, want to be one of the founder of this AIS. And then US is very angry because the US already persuaded Australia and South Korea to join it. And today someone, just 30 minutes before I came here, no, just 5 minutes before I leave my office, I got a call, and someone said they found that the new list of this AIIB and already have the South Korea on it. Well, that's strange. I said, I don't know whether it's true or not, because America tell the South Korea, you cannot join this. And now, the even shocking news, this afternoon, Germany, France, and Italy, and make announcement, they are going to considering to become to follow the suit of the UK. Well, I think that's really something, right? And people, hey, wait a minute, you're betrayed the US. And so the last one is that Xi Jinping suggests that usually China do not initiate things. China thinks if you initiate any efforts, you cause troubles. Right? Xi Jinping said, no, we should take initiation. And the last suggestion about reform is that we should use our advantage, do something, right? And like China suggested, Asia Pacific free trade. And this is targeted at the current problem. And I think Professor Lee definitely told you that. And the world faces a big problem about the free trade. The negotiation in the WTO moves nowhere. For decades, cannot move. You need to establish a new organization to reform the norms of international trade. So Americans suggest the TPP, and then the ASEAN countries are RCEP, and China suggests the Asian Pacific Free Trade Agreement. So I don't know which one can be implemented. I have no idea which one can get the wider support. But one thing is clear, and China initiates something, and use our advantage. Do anyone understand what I mean when I say China uses its own advantage to suggest the Asia Pacific free trade? China is the largest trader in the world, and from last year. And someone said from 2013, someone said from 2014. Anyhow, and we have an advantage of the trade in this.